On this week's NESN Patriots podcast, we will preview the Patriots' upcoming divisional round playoff game against the Los Angeles Chargers, and we will talk about how the head coaching carousel has shaken out for New England. Hello and welcome to the NESN Patriots podcast. I'm Doug Kai, joined as always by Zach Cox. Zach, how are you doing?
Doing well, Doug. You know, I've got to say I'm pretty excited with how this whole Patriots divisional round matchup shook out, because I know there were complaints last year that there was kind of I think the word was no juice going into that Titans game last year, and that was totally correct. That week was boring as hell. This week is completely different. I'm actually pretty excited to watch this Patriots-Chargers game.
Yeah, I am too, and we will definitely get into that in a bit, but let's first talk about some things that happened in the past, the last couple of days, with the way that the NFL's head coaching carousel has shaken out for New England. For now, as of Wednesday, January 9th at 10:37 a.m., Josh McDaniels says that he is sticking around with the Patriots. Now, this is something that I might not totally believe until that Cleveland Browns head coaching job gets filled, and by the time that you guys are listening to this, that might have already happened. But let's assume Josh McDaniels is telling the truth. But, I mean, last year did prove that McDaniels isn't afraid of the outside optics of changing his mind after he's already committed to something.
Yeah. So for now, I guess to catch up people who missed the news, yesterday, Josh McDaniels interviewed for the Green Bay Packers head coaching position. That job ultimately was filled by Matt LaFleur from Tennessee. So that left Josh McDaniels with really kind of no options, I guess.
Right, because he turned down an interview with the Bengals. And that was the only team, at least according to reports, that he had even received an interview request from. And then we asked him during a conference call yesterday whether he has had any contact with the Cleveland Browns. He said no contact at all. And then the follow-up question there was, so do you expect to be back in New England next year, or are you still kind of intending to apply for more jobs? He said, no, I think he said the book is closed and I will be here moving forward, I think were his words. So from the sounds of things, it sounds like Josh McDaniels does intend to be here with the Patriots next season, which I think is obviously a win for the Patriots, considering they don't have a kind of obvious replacement there for Josh McDaniels. We talked before that probably Chad O'Shea would probably be the next man up there, but he's never really had any kind of extensive any offensive coordinator experience at the NFL level. Very minimal play calling duties. So definitely a win for the Patriots, and it kind of shows that I think Josh McDaniels is only going to leave New England for kind of the absolute right situation. The fact that he didn't really cast I guess we don't know whether he didn't cast a wide net or teams kind of didn't show a lot of interest in him in this head coaching cycle, because with 8 teams with head coaching vacancies, only 2 requested to interview him as far as we know. So I think it shows that kind of he's only going to leave New England for the best possible situation, which probably means he's going to be here for kind of the foreseeable future. Yeah, definitely. I think there is something to teams kind of being scared away from how McDaniels handled that situation with the Colts.
Understandably so, I would say.
There was a report, I think it was on Saturday or Sunday, that if McDaniels left, Kliff Kingsbury would have been an option to be the Patriots' next offensive coordinator. And it's kind of funny the way that the NFL moves so quickly, because, I mean, as of Sunday, the report out there was the Patriots are bracing for McDaniels to leave and Kingsbury's an option for that offensive coordinator role. By Tuesday, McDaniels was committed to New England as the offensive coordinator, and Kliff Kingsbury had a different NFL head coaching job. He got hired by the Arizona Cardinals. And, I mean, just some inside baseball here. After the report came out that the Patriots, could potentially hire Kingsbury, it seemed like that might be, a few weeks down the road. So I plan to write a story this week basically asking former, players or coordinators or whoever who worked with Kingsbury if they think that his 1 year in the Patriot system would have been enough for him to actually work as the offensive coordinator next year. And basically by the time that I was actually talking to people, everything had changed and the story completely flipped. I actually just wound up talking to Damon Heward, who was another quarterback on that 2003 Patriots team when Kliff Kingsbury was drafted by the Patriots, just about how he was as a teammate and if he saw any, glimmers of head coaching
possibilities in his future. But yeah, it's just kind of amazing how quickly everything shifts and changes. And it's also amazing how Josh McDaniels is, 42 years old, 41, 42? Yes. I think he's just a little bit older than Tom Brady. But, I mean, if he were hired right now, he would almost be on the older side of NFL head coaches. Kingsbury's 39, Matt LaFleur is 39. It seems like everyone just wants the next Sean McVeigh as their head coach, and Sean McVeigh is 32 years old. So it's kind of amazing that McDaniels, for one reason or another, has kind of fallen out of favor with NFL teams.
It's kind of incredible just how all teams seem to want nowadays is somebody remotely connected to Sean McVeigh.
Yeah, I don't see this going well.
I don't see it going well either, because Sean McVeigh is obviously a tremendous head coach.
Right.
He hasn't had kind of high-level success with the Rams yet, but he's still kind of relatively early in his tenure. What he's been able to do in LA has been pretty fantastic,
yeah.
But it just seems like teams are just looking for the closest Sean McVeigh clone they could find. I think it was Kevin Clark from The Ringer who tweeted this out the other day, that even in the Cardinals kind of introductory kind of news release or whatever, right, of Kliff Kingsbury's hiring, they mentioned that he's good friends with Sean McVeigh, even though he's never actually worked with McVeigh in any professional capacity or anything like that. This is all teams want nowadays, and I do think it's kind of it's maybe it's hurting a guy like Josh McDaniels, but it's definitely hurting some of these older kind of former head coaches that are looking to kind of get back into the mix. I know Bruce Arians was hired down in Tampa Bay, but from what I've heard, some other kind of coaches that were recent, maybe like a Mike Munchak kind of guy, or guys in that sort of at that sort of level, maybe aren't getting the opportunities that they would have in recent years because teams just really want that kind of next kind of hot shot young gun guy.
This is really doing major favors for Mike Shanahan's coaching tree, because that's basically where all of these guys started out originally. Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, I guess even Anthony Lynn is on the Mike Shanahan coaching tree. Gary Kubiak, Art Shell,
the 2013
Redskins
who
3-13
and had Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, and Matt LaFleur all on that staff. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. But there are still some head coaching availabilities out there, so Patriots aren't completely out of the woods in getting their coordinators back. Brian Flores, who is their linebackers coach / de facto defensive coordinator, interviewed with the Broncos, who have not filled their head coaching job, the Browns, and the
Dolphins. And the Packers.
Well, the Packers
have filled it.
Yeah, so Dolphins, Broncos, and Browns still could potentially hire Flores, but...
And according to reports, I think yesterday, the Browns are down to Vic Fangio or Mike Munchak.
The Broncos.
We just mentioned. Broncos, yes. So there, it sounds like Flores will not be going to Denver, at least according to current reports. So it does sound like it's down to Miami or Cleveland for him. And then there was also a report yesterday or 2 days ago that he is a front runner or kind of a favorite or one of the reports out of Miami suggests that he's definitely kind of near the top of their list in their coaching search. So we'll see where that winds up with him. Again, by the time this comes out, some or all of these coaching positions could be filled. But yeah, there's definitely still a danger that the Patriots would have to kind of find a new defensive coordinator for the second time in 2 years.
Yeah, and it seems like, Flores and Chris Richard are both up for that Dolphins job. And I don't know if they seem like the favorites or just basically on what I was reading, it seems like they're two top candidates. And I actually wonder if Flores makes it further than Richard in the playoffs, maybe the Dolphins would just, if it's close, hire Chris Richard so that they can get him right away. Yep. Exactly. And not have to wait until, I don't know how long the Patriots are going to make it in the playoffs, but if they would have to wait until after the Super Bowl, that's definitely, it's a benefit to get a guy in early.
Plus, I think the McDaniels thing from last year could just sort of make teams want to be more proactive in their coaching search, because even if they don't expect Brian Flores to kind of do the same thing that Josh McDaniels did last year and sort of have an about face at the last minute, the Colts lucked out by getting Frank Reich and kind of it all turned out well since they're in the divisional round this year. But remember last year when McDaniels turned them away, every head coaching position had already been filled,
Yeah.
and really every head coaching candidate had kind of come off the board. So they were forced to sort of scramble there and just sort of grab the first guy who looked like he could fit, and thankfully for them, he did. But I think teams, after seeing that, might kind of want to make sure that they're not the team that's in that situation this year.
Definitely, and that really shook things up a lot with Frank Reich. Going to the Colts, John DeFilippo wound up becoming the offensive coordinator of the Vikings, whereas he might have stuck around with the Eagles.
And he ended up getting fired.
And he actually wound up getting fired. So that had like a major trickle-down effect because if DeFilippo had stuck around with the Eagles as offensive coordinator, maybe that season shakes out a little bit differently. Maybe he doesn't get fired, and then he's probably being talked about as a potential head coach right now rather than, probably searching for an offensive coordinator position once all these jobs get filled. So pretty crazy stuff last year with the Josh McDaniels stuff. This year, if Brian Flores does get hired away, there is some rumblings that Greg Schiano could become the Patriots' next defensive coordinator. He's not staying with Ohio State. He said that he wants to, or someone said that he wants to pursue NFL opportunities.
Ryan Day, the Ohio State head coach, said he was leaving to pursue NFL opportunities. Yeah.
And if Flores did leave, there is definitely no obvious candidate to take over as defensive coordinator for the Patriots. The defensive assistants left on the staff are, we went over this before, but Josh Boyer, who's always been with the cornerbacks or defensive backs, Brendan Daly, who's always been with the defensive line, Steve Belichick, who is a fairly new positional coach who's only worked with safeties, and then you're talking about like DeMarcus Covington, who's only a defensive assistant right now. So, I think that they would either have to have Bill Belichick serve as that defensive coordinator, which would be possible if Josh McDaniels comes back. They could kind of split duties there, or they could bring in a guy like Schiano. And even if they do bring in a guy like Schiano, Belichick would definitely have to take on more responsibilities next year, bringing in someone who's never worked on New England staff before. They've also got Brett Bielema as a possibility, but I think what we said last week was I'd be surprised if his future in coaching is as an NFL defensive coordinator. He'd probably want to get back to a college head coaching position eventually.
Yeah, it's been a very long time since the Patriots made kind of a high profile hire from outside of their organization. It seems like all their coordinators in recent years have been just sort of risen up the ranks, guys who started as sort of coaching assistants or kind of real low-level quality control guys or low-level staffers, and have kind of moved their way up between Josh McDaniels and Matt Patricia, and then Brian Flores, and even Bill O'Brien took a similar kind of path. So it would be sort of a departure from the norm for the Patriots to go out and kind of hire an outside guy to be their defensive coordinator. But like you said, there might not be another kind of quality internal option. So that would definitely be something to watch if Brian Flores does indeed leave.
And usually those guys actually kind of wind up serving like some role like Brett Bielema does. Yeah. It's they don't usually become
sort of an
ambiguous
kind of role where he helps out in a lot of different areas.
One guy that was hired from outside, and this was kind of surprising, and I only really looked back into this because I was looking into the Kliff Kingsbury stuff, was John Hufnagel was the Patriots quarterback coach for one season in 2003, and he had previously worked as the Browns, Colts, and Jaguars quarterback coach, and he actually left the Patriots to become the Giants offensive coordinator for 3 years. Then he went on to become a CFL head coach. So that was just, I totally forgot that John Hufnagel was quarterback coach for 1 year. And that was the year before Josh McDaniels took over as quarterback coach in 2004.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember the John Hufnagel era, I'm not going to
lie. Neither did I until this. But let's get into this week's divisional round preview. Patriots are taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. I've not said San Diego nor typed San Diego once. And I'm very proud of myself.
I've been good, yeah.
I think it's just so ingrained in my head, or maybe not ingrained in my head, but I don't want to make the mistake that I've very purposely been saying.
You don't want to be that guy.
I'm not even saying LA. I'm not messing around. I'm just going Los Angeles Chargers every time I talk about them.
It doesn't roll off the tongue as well, though. San Diego Chargers is just such a great name. Los Angeles, it seems kind of clunky.
And, I mean, who knows how long they're even going to stay in Los Angeles, so maybe we shouldn't get used to saying that. Maybe we should just be sticking with Chargers. But that is their opponent. Lots of intriguing matchups in this game. Let's start off with Melvin Gordon, who's got 2 bad knees right now.
Both of the Chargers running backs are slightly banged up. Even Austin Eckler, their backup, was I believe he was questionable for that Ravens game this past weekend. Ended up playing, but neither of those guys are at 100% right now. It seems.
Yeah, and this just feels to me like Le'Veon Bell a couple of years ago, where Melvin Gordon gets out there for one or two snaps, and then gets banged up, and then you don't see him again. And obviously, if that does happen, then everyone's going to be saying, oh, the Patriots only beat the Chargers because Melvin Gordon was banged up or didn't play or whatever. But it just kind of feels like that sort of game to me. And if that does happen, or if he's just not very effective, it's supposed to be cold, it might snow, it's going to be windy, it's not great conditions to be running on two bad knees. If the running game's not there for the Chargers, I think the Patriots defense shouldn't have a major problem stopping the passing game, because they can really designate all of their resources to stopping Phillip Rivers in that passing attack.
Yeah, I've kind of had it in my mind all week that I know I said earlier in the show that this is kind of a much more exciting matchup than we've seen in recent years. The divisional round for the Patriots is just basically kind of a throwaway game every single year, which is kind of crazy. I mean, going back in their 7-game divisional round winning streak, they haven't lost in the divisional round since 2010 when the Jets came in here and beat them. In that span, there's really been only one compelling game, and that was that Ravens game in 2014, which is a fantastic game, one of the best playoff games in Patriots history, really. Outside of that, 5 of the other 6 have been decided by double digits. The only kind of outlier there was that Chiefs game in 2015. That was 27-20, but the Chiefs got kind of a garbage time touchdown right at the end. Game overall was kind of boring, basically one that was the outcome was never really in doubt. So is it going to be different this year? It should be different this year because these Chargers, they went 12-4 during the regular season. They beat a pretty good Ravens team. They really sort of I loved the strategy that they pulled on the Ravens to kind of eliminate Lamar Jackson from that game until late, where they're running 7 defensive backs the whole time. They've got talent on both sides of the ball. This should be a close game and a game that the Chargers should have a solid chance of winning. But I don't know. For some reason, it's in my gut says this is going to be a game that we hype up all week, and then maybe it's something like you said where Melvin Gordon isn't 100%, or something happens and it just ends up being another easy Patriots victory. I don't know why. That's kind of bad analysis when I'm just saying this is what my gut feels.
Right.
But that is what my gut feels.
No, it is, and that's fair to say. And I think that something that's gone a little bit under the radar, and that no one's talking about so much, and a lot of people have talked about it with Tom Brady, is that Phillip Rivers had a fantastic start to his season through about week 13, week 14. Then his numbers really started to tail off there at the end. And even in that game against the Ravens, in which I thought he played well, he averaged 5 yards per passing attempt. He only threw for 160 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. I do definitely wonder how he's going to look if the weather is as bad as everyone's predicting in this game. If there is, I mean, I know that weather changes, but like if you're outside right now, it's one of the windiest days I've experienced in New England in quite some time. I could barely close my front door. I could barely walk through. And Gillette Stadium is an especially windy place for one reason or another. It's usually
the construction of it is just kind of a wind tunnel.
Yeah, it usually seems like at least 10 miles per hour windier here than it does anywhere else. And crossing through that field, it was extremely windy today. And if the conditions are that way, I don't know how well some of those short passes or those passes to the sideline that Phillip Rivers is side-arming, they might start to float a little bit. They might start to get a little bit inaccurate just with the way that he's been playing over the last few weeks.
Yeah, he really has not been – he was an MVP candidate until, like you said, maybe week 13, 14, 15, and then he's really taken a step back recently. Did not play, or at least his stats were not particularly good against the Ravens. Again, the Ravens do have one of the better defenses in the NFL, so maybe you can chalk it up to that. But even in looking back at the game that these teams played last year, I went through and rewatched most of that game the other night, and Phillip Rivers didn't have a great game against a Patriots defense in that game that I think was significantly worse than the Patriots defense they currently have constructed.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at the starting lineup for the Patriots in that game is kind of hilarious. I mean, they had Malcolm Butler, obviously, but then they had Johnson Batamosi, Jordan Richards, David Harris, and Alan Branch all started that game for the Patriots. Stephon Gilmore, Dante Hightower, Malcolm Brown all missed it due to injury. And then guys like J.C. Jackson, Jason McCourty, Danny Shelton, John Simon, potentially Adrian Claiborne, guys that might have or probably will play at least a considerable role in this game. All were not part of that team. And then Phillip Rivers went 17. Well, let me get those stats. I was looking at the wrong game. 17 of 30, 212 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. No Chargers receiver had a particularly good game. I mean, their leading receiver was Travis Benjamin with 5 catches for 64 yards. Tyrell Williams, 1 catch, 24 yards. Keenan Allen, 4 catches, 5 targets, 61 yards. So overall, it was a pretty bad day for the Chargers offense. Outside of one big play was Melvin Gordon's 87-yard touchdown run, which you can kind of blame on Cassius Marsh, who really just sort of totally blew the edge on that play, let Melvin Gordon get free. But Gordon only had 132 rushing yards in that game, which looks like a lot, but when you see that he had 87 of them on 1 carry, overall, not really that great. So I don't know. I know this Chargers team has, even though most of the personnel on offense is the same, they've changed a little bit. I mean, Austin Eckler's taken on a bigger role. Mike Williams has kind of emerged a little bit in his second season, but I don't know. Overall, last year it was a pretty strong effort by a Patriots defense that, again, I think is a lot better now.
Yeah, no, that is definitely a good point. The Patriots defense, I think, certainly has been playing at a much higher level than they were last year.
And they only allowed 13 points in that game, too,
right?
So.
Yeah, and I was crunching some numbers here. Phillip Rivers, weeks 1 through 13, had an adjusted completion percentage, which takes out drop passes, throwaways, spike balls, bad passes, and passes where the quarterback has hit. Week 1 through 13, it was 79.5%. Then week 14 through the wild card round was 75.3%. So he definitely took a hit there. Interestingly, Tom Brady, week 1 through 13, had a 74.3 adjusted completion percentage, 79.7 week 14 through the wild card round. So, I mean, we think, or I certainly thought that Tom Brady was struggling over the last, few weeks of the season, but his adjusted completion percentage was actually higher over those last few weeks of the season than it was early.
That's a little surprising. Maybe, was he having, more throwaways, maybe? With
Might have
some
been more
of those
throwaways.
kind of bailing out of those plays more quickly?
They certainly had some drops in there.
True.
There was some batted passes, certainly. So, yeah, I mean, that was just definitely not what I was expecting in that game. Let's talk about the Chargers defense a little bit. Or actually, let's talk about the receivers real quick.
Sure.
Keenan Allen, Tyrell Williams, and Mike Williams, this is probably the tallest set of receivers that they might ever face. I mean, Tyrell Williams and Mike Williams are both, 6'5"?
I think 6'4" and 6'5", and then
6'4",
Keenan
6'5".
Allen is 6'2",
Yeah.
so he's a pretty big guy as well.
So I think that certainly expect to see Stephon Gilmore on Keenan Allen, and then that would leave J.C. Jackson, Jason McCourty on Tyrell Williams and Mike Williams. I'm not really sure how they decided to divvy up those matchups. Maybe they just wind up playing sides with those guys. Maybe they just keep I guess they can't really keep Jason McCourty in the slot if Stephon Gilmore is on Keenan Allen, because he's kind of their slot guy when they go in those 3 receiver sets. But I don't know. It's definitely a mismatch to have 2 6'4" and 6'5" receivers going up against J.C. Jackson and Jason McCourty. But I feel like J.C. Jackson's done a pretty good job this year against taller receivers in general, and Jason McCourty's been solid all year too.
Yeah, J.C. Jackson has done a pretty good job on whatever receiver they happen to put him against. He really had a fantastic rookie year, didn't allow a single touchdown, led the league in passer rating against. So I'm pretty excited to see what we can see from him in his playoff debut here.
Yeah, certainly. He had an extremely strong last half of the season there, where he really did emerge as that number 2 cornerback. So let's move over to the Chargers defense. Against the Ravens, they were playing with, 7 defensive backs?
Played 7 defensive backs on all but 1 of their defensive snaps, which was really kind of a departure from what they've done all season. Looking into it a little closely, they do play a lot of dime. Mm-hmm. Dime is basically their base defense in a lot of games with 2 linebackers and 6 defensive backs, but they hadn't used this quarter set really at all during the regular season. I think they played 50 snaps out of it, which was something like 8%, or it was a very low percentage, and I'm assuming most of those were just kind of in sort of 3rd and 25 situations where it kind of almost a prevent defense. But they used it on basically every play against the Ravens. And I'm curious to see whether this was just kind of a one-off game plan to stop Lamar Jackson, who had really torn them up running the ball a couple weeks before, had torn up basically everybody running the ball. Mm-hmm. They were the first team to play him twice, and obviously this new strategy worked because Lamar Jackson looked like the worst quarterback in the NFL until the fourth quarter when he sort of got a little bit of a comeback going. I'm curious to see if they use any of that defense this week against the Patriots, or if they kind of go back to what they were having before with those linebackers in there. Adrian Phillips, one of their safeties, has been basically playing as a linebacker for a lot of the season, but they usually have a guy like Hayes Pollard or Kyle Emanuel, or before he got hurt, Jatavis Brown in there next to him. Jatavis Brown got hurt in Week 17, so they haven't had a game really other than that Ravens game in kind of their new personnel with their current state at linebacker. I think if they play more linebackers, that favors the Patriots, because we saw what they did last year against the Chargers when they were able to get James White and Rex Burkhead and Deion Lewis matched up against linebackers. They really tore them up in the passing game. I mean, when in passes to running backs against the Chargers last year, Tom Brady was 14 of 15 for 163 yards. A lot of those coming on third down. They were able to get a lot of kind of third and long conversions out of that. And overall this season, the Chargers have been really, really bad at defending running backs in the passing game. I mean, I think Kevin Duffy, our buddy from the Boston Herald, had the stat. The Chargers this year allowed the second most receiving yards to running backs in the past decade.
Wow.
I think like the 2015 Rams or some team like that was the only one that had more than them. So maybe they look at that and they say, hey, let's just roll with what was working. We'd rather have someone like Adrian Phillips or Derwin James or one of these safeties be in charge of covering a guy like James White or Rex Burkhead rather than one of our slower, bigger linebackers. Or maybe they kind of move it back a little bit and don't think they'll be able to defend a power running game with James Devlin and Sony Michel in there. I don't know. It's going to be a fascinating matchup. I'm really kind of intrigued to see how the Chargers try to combat this Patriots offense.
Yeah. Chargers linebackers played 2 snaps in that game against the Ravens.
2 total snaps, one apiece.
Hayes Pollard played 1 snap. Kyle Emanuel played 1 snap. And those guys did not play a ton during the regular season.
They were sort of lower down on the depth chart before some guys got hurt.
Yeah, Uchenna and Wuso, or however you pronounce his name, played 16 snaps, but he was used as a pass rusher against the Ravens. Chargers linebackers, Emanuel and Pollard, neither one dropped back in coverage a single time. The only guys who dropped back in coverage were the defensive backs, and then their nose tackle dropped back once, and Melvin Ingram dropped back once. Otherwise, it was all defensive backs. I think that as soon as the Patriots bring out James Devlin, the Chargers will have to get away from this, just because I don't think that you can match, a power running scheme with a quarter's defense. It's just not really possible. And I mean, let's see if they do it. If it works for them, then who knows? But I just don't think that guys like Adrian Phillips and Derwin James can hold up against the Patriots if they do bring out, James Devlin, Dwayne Allen, Rob Gronkowski, some of the bigger blockers that they have, who can also catch passes. And I could even see them, if they do bring out James Devlin, Rob Gronkowski, then you split out James Devlin and you still pass the ball. And then you get someone, whoever it is, out basically wasted space covering James Devlin. So I think that it's going to be very transparent the way that the Chargers are going to try to defend the Patriots just because of their linebacker situation. I think they're probably either going to be stuck in that quarters or dime defense, or they're going to have to come out heavy. And if they come out heavy, then, the Patriots are just going to throw the ball on them. Like you were saying, they're going to toss it off to James White. I do think that this will be a game where it's a little bit more difficult to target Gronkowski. It's going to be a more difficult game to target Julian Edelman just because 2 of the Chargers' best defenders are Derwin James and Desmond King. Desmond King's kind of their slot guy. Derwin James is that do-everything safety that's in there. He's kind of their Earl Thomas type, I guess, if you're comparing this to the Seahawks defenses of the past, of which this is the same system. Bill Belichick has said that numerous times. But yeah, the middle of the field might not be the best place that Tom Brady's throwing the ball to Gronk and Edelman, but he might have some success to the perimeter guys just because, while the Chargers' cornerbacks are decent, Casey Hayward's had a good year. Michael Davis, I think, has been picked on a little bit more. They're just not as good as some of those guys, those defensive backs in the middle of the field.
Definitely. I think the Chargers have a lot of talent in the secondary. They have a lot of talent up front. We haven't even talked about Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram, who are 2 of the better pass rushers in the NFL. But that linebacker spot is definitely it was a bit of a weakness even before some of these guys got hurt. Now just with the lack of depth there, it's really kind of the weak point of the team right now.
And yeah, let's talk about Ingram and Bosa. I mean, it's my opinion whenever we do these games now, where we always talk about these pass rushers. We always talk about, Patriots have to watch out for them. Then they always wind up neutralizing them. And I did a podcast with Trags, Mike Petralia from CLNS last night, and he brought up the fact that the only game that you can point to where the Patriots were ravaged by an opposing team's pass rush came in 2015 against the Broncos AFC Championship game. I think that that's a different situation. I know that I'm sounding like the eternal optimist in this matchup, but that was a much different situation the Patriots were facing in that game. It was on the road, which plays a huge part, especially since the Patriots are a much different team at home this year. The other thing in that game was that the Patriots running backs were James White, Brandon Bolden, and Steven Jackson. There was no threat whatsoever for the Patriots to run the ball, so the Broncos could just pin their ears back in that game and get after Tom Brady. The Chargers have to worry about Sony Michel, Rex Burkhead, James White, Cordell Patterson running the ball this week, so they can't bring the same approach that the Broncos did in that 2015 game because they actually have to respect the run in this one.
Absolutely, and I think the Patriots actually did a pretty good job. It depends on what kind of stat you favor. I know the kind of stat pressures versus sacks argument has kind of been raised a lot, especially around here, talking about guys like Trey Flowers who get a lot of pressures, not a lot of sacks. Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram had 17 total pressures in this game last season, which was more than 10 teams had against the Patriots during that 2017 season. But they had only had one sack, which was by Bosa, had one quarterback hit, which was by Ingram. And watching the tape, they really their pressure didn't fluster Tom Brady all that much. Right. I mean, Tom Brady had he definitely started that game really hot. He slumped a little bit in the kind of third, fourth quarter, but 17 pressures weren't really able to move Tom Brady off of his spot nearly as much as Bosa and Ingram normally are able to do to opposing quarterbacks. I mean, they were both, especially Melvin Gordon was fantastic against the Ravens the other day. Mm-hmm. He had 2 sacks, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery. Bosa also had a sack. Bill Belichick was talking earlier this week about how they like to do some funky things with them on third down. They like to move. They'll like to move Melvin Gordon inside, or not Melvin Gordon. I've mixed that up a couple times this week. They like to move Melvin Ingram inside, have him rush against a guard. Sometimes they'll put him and Bosa on the same side, kind of do some stuff over there. But those looks didn't really fluster the Patriots either last year. I mean, watching the tape, they tried to do that on 8 of the Patriots' 19 third downs. On those plays, Tom Brady went 6 of 8 for 76 yards and 5 first downs. So those creative looks didn't really kind of fluster the Patriots last year. I think their offensive line has also improved this year, the Patriots, from bringing Trent Brown in there to replace Nate Solder. The interior of the Patriots' offensive line has been really strong this year. Marcus Cannon has been a little bit of a weak point. I think he's kind of taken a bit of a step back this year, but overall I think the Patriots' offensive line is pretty stout. So, I mean, just from looking at that, I think they should be able to kind of neutralize what Bosa and Ingram kind of bring to this game.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just how quickly Tom Brady gets rid of the football.
That was the other thing, is his release was incredibly quick in this game last year. A lot of quick passes, a lot of swing passes, a lot of kind of like quick slants, quick hitting things.
Yeah, last year Brady, while he was under pressure from the Chargers, went 9 of 18 for 141 yards. When he was not under pressure, he was 23 of 29 for 192 yards with a touchdown. Overall went 32 of 47 for 333 yards and a touchdown. So, I mean, overall, that was definitely an impressive game from Tom Brady. And like you say, he didn't seem overly flustered by the pressure there. I'm looking it up real quick just to see how quickly he did get rid of the ball.
His time to throw was longer than I had expected it to be. I looked it up, and it was kind of above his season average, which he did have some plays, some play actions where he was able to kind of sit back there for a while. But on a lot of their more productive plays, it was getting the ball out in a second and a half. It was
taking on average 3.8 seconds to sack Tom Brady, which is on the relatively high side, I would say, as far as sacks go.
Also, one quick sidebar on watching this game. We talked about how Tom Brady handled pressure in this game. I was seeing some things in Tom Brady in this game that we hadn't seen from him in the last couple of weeks. Where what kind of the big... I know it's been a big debate over whether Tom Brady has actually been struggling this season. I think he has. I think if you look at the way he's played, he's kind of playing differently than he has in the past. And I think watching this game is an easy kind of illustration of that. There were some plays where Tom Brady was just statue in the pocket while everything's crashing down around him. He got I believe it was David Andrews got pushed right back into him, and while Andrews was hitting him, he just sort of whipped a pass out to James White. He was making plays in this game that for a while late in the season you didn't see him make. So I just think watching this game, it sort of illustrates how a lot of people have said sort of Tom Brady's struggles have been overblown, and maybe they have been, but he was definitely doing things last year that he hasn't been doing this season.
And I'm curious to see if he does kind of try to step up his game a little bit because the playoffs have rolled around.
He's had a couple weeks off now.
Yeah, exactly.
Should be fully rested, fully healthy.
All right, I think that will do it for this week's NESN Patriots podcast. We're kind of right up against the time here. So what's your prediction for this game, I guess?
My prediction for this game is I'm going to go with my gut there. I'm going to say Patriots win more comfortably than everybody's kind of expecting this week. I'll give them 30 to 17.
30-17. All right, I like that. I'll go with 28-20 in this game, and maybe kind of like a last-minute score from the Chargers or something. But no, I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous because the Patriots are only favored by 4.5, but I do think they're going to win this game. I think it's going to be a little bit more handily than most people do expect. So keep it on NESN.com for all of your Patriots coverage. Follow Zach on Twitter at ZachCoxNESN. Follow me at Doug Kide. And we will be back next week either previewing the AFC Championship game or doing a season recap. So either way, you'll be able to hear us next week on the NESN Patriots podcast.